In this video, I'm going to describe the concept of one asset accounting. Under one asset accounting, a balance sheet has only one asset, and that asset is Bitcoin. And that Bitcoin has to be held in self-custody or, controlled by the entity to which that balance sheet pertains on the base layer of the Bitcoin network. And then everything else on the balance sheet is a liability. All right. So today, if an individual, say, has a $1 million house and a $500,000 mortgage, and those are all the assets and liabilities, then the house appears on the asset side of the balance sheet, $1 million house, and the mortgage appears on the liability side. So that's $500,000. And so the individual has a net worth of $1 million minus $500,000 is $500,000. So not only is the entity, the individual, solvent, but the entity has a net worth of $500,000. And we do the exact same thing with a corporate balance sheet, except that instead of referring to the net $500,000 as net worth, we just call it shareholders' equity, but it's the exact same thing. Now, under one asset accounting, what would happen is that both the $1 million house and the $500,000 mortgage are liabilities. And so we take the sum of the absolute value of each. All right. So the sum of the absolute value of each, the absolute value of $1 million is $1 million. The absolute value of $500,000 mortgage is $500,000. So 1 million plus 500,000 is 1.5 million on the liability side. And on the asset side, we would have to have $1.5 million of Bitcoin, or else the entity, $1.5 million or greater of Bitcoin. And if we don't, then that individual is not solvent. Okay. Now, now, of course, this is counterintuitive. The idea that the house would be a liability, the house itself, right? We're all familiar. We understand the mortgage is a liability, but this idea that both the mortgage and the house itself are liabilities is counterintuitive, and it seems illogical. But keep in mind that pretty much everything in the Bitcoin paradigm is counterintuitive. And this is one of the big reasons why many people are resistant to accepting or investigating or even being curious to learn about Bitcoin in the first place. Now, why is that house a liability? Well, the house is a liability broadly because when we move into one asset accounting, our whole concept of what is an asset and what is a liability changes and morphs and, like shifts over time. I mean, this could take 2 decades to get there, right? But eventually what happens is that humanity, everything orients around Bitcoin. All right. And so as a part of this orientation, this shift into this paradigm over 10 or 20 years, what happens is that people see that there is only one asset. There's only one thing that you can own, and that is Bitcoin, and everything else is a liability. Now, of course, people will choose to own houses just as they choose to own houses today for many subjective reasons, like the security that a home represents, a place to be safe with your family and keep your family safe, and to be able to store your stuff, and to a place that you have access to without having to ask anyone else for permission 365 days a year, 24/7. And these are all subjective reasons that people will continue to make the decision to own a home. But today, people make the decision based on those reasons, but also financial reasons. And so the financial reasons will be stripped away, all right, as the monetary premium of every asset flows into Bitcoin over time. And people will recognize and accept that when they purchase a home, they are taking on a liability. Okay. Now, a house is a liability not only because it represents a stream of future expenses for repairs and maintenance and taxes and insurance and so on, but also, and maybe even more importantly, under one asset accounting, because of the opportunity cost that owning that home represents relative to Bitcoin. Because every day, every year that you own that home, you you are reducing your capacity to obtain Bitcoin. And you're reducing that capacity more and more and more as time elapses. And again, people will make the decision to do that for a variety of reasons. But that's why the house ends up in the liability column along with the mortgage. Now, if you think about this, right? So we have a house that's $1 million and we have a mortgage that's $500,000. That means in order to be solvent, we've got to have $1.5 million of Bitcoin on the asset side of the balance sheet. So if you think about this, this will drive, again, what may seem to be counterintuitive decision making that is quite different than the decisions that people make today. So if you just think about that example, well, if you don't have the $500,000 mortgage and you just have the $1 million home, then you have reduced the amount of Bitcoin that you need to have in order to achieve solvency. So today, many people would say, well, I'll have as big a mortgage as possible on the home, because then as the home increases in value, then, it's basically a way of increasing your the value of your assets at a greater percentage, because of the fact that you're basically just levering up the asset. So this is all going to change under one asset accounting, because it won't make sense to have that mortgage if it means that you're insolvent when you could not have the mortgage, and then this would require you to have less Bitcoin. So in that example, again, if you just have the house, it's $1 million liability, and it doesn't have a mortgage on it, and that means you only have to have $1 million of Bitcoin or more in order to achieve solvency. Now, what does this mean for companies as all of this unfolds? So basically, all companies, as we move toward one asset accounting, the management teams will have several choices, and they'll kind of all figure this out at a different rate of speed as time unfolds. And the choices are: liquidate all of your current assets, shut down your operations, and return the fiat that you get from that liquidation to your investors so that they can buy Bitcoin. All right. Or you could liquidate all of your, what we call assets today, I'm saying current assets, and buy and hold and secure Bitcoin on behalf of your shareholders. That's another choice that the management team could make. Another choice is design and produce a service or product that people will pay Bitcoin for. All right. So in other words, instead of designing and producing an SUV that costs $120,000 and is going to, the engine is going to fail in the first 10,000 miles probably, and then you have to, go into the whole warranty process and all that kind of thing, design an SUV that lasts for 1 million miles. All right. People will pay Bitcoin for that. All right. Or what you could do as a management team is make a decision that your company is going to produce Bitcoin. All right. So now, but one of the things that I want to highlight here is that if you go back and think about the balance sheet of the individual, of any given individual, the only thing that can be on the asset side of that balance sheet is Bitcoin held in self-custody. Bitcoin that entity controls on the base layer of the Bitcoin blockchain. So from that perspective, it makes no sense to own shares in a company that liquidated its what were previously called assets in order to buy Bitcoin and then hold Bitcoin on behalf of its investors. Because for an investor, those 100 shares that you have are going to be on the liability side of your balance sheet. And then they're going to require that whatever that absolute value is of those shares, you've got to have that amount of actual Bitcoin on the Bitcoin side of your balance sheet in order to achieve solvency. So really, ultimately, it will make no sense for any corporation to own Bitcoin for the purpose of selling shares to investors, because those will just be liabilities for the investors. Okay. Now, one asset accounting is an example of the larger orientation of society around Bitcoin that I anticipate will unfold over time. And this also includes Bitcoin mining 2.0, in which the nation state model that we have today collapses over the coming decades into a model in which societies are organized around maybe 2 or 3 dozen Bitcoin mining 2.0 complexes on planet Earth that mine the 5 million, or however many million it is, roughly 5 million lost Bitcoin. And these would be cooperative efforts around large bodies of water that include nuclear power plants, quantum computer mining facilities, and all of this would happen after we have had a BIP, a Bitcoin Improvement Protocol, that develops and makes available to Bitcoin holders on the Bitcoin blockchain quantum resistant wallets. And this is likely to happen, and it'll probably happen faster than these facilities are able to ramp up in order to start mining Bitcoin. And it's really as simple as, say, wallets. Say there's a BIP where we have wallets that take the 256 bits that represent the private, or the private keys for a wallet. And then today we run that through SHA-256, and then we have output, and then there's some kind of elliptical algorithm that's applied to that, and then we generate the public keys, and then from the public keys we generate, or the public key, and then from that we generate the addresses. Well, what could happen with these new wallets is you take the 256 bits, run it through SHA-256, then you take that output and run it through SHA-256 again, and then maybe again, and then do the elliptical algorithm thing, and then generate the public key, and so on. And so I think it's as simple as that for quantum resistant wallets to be developed. And so something like that is likely to occur. And then what that means is that everyone who has Bitcoin in a wallet today, there will be a period of time. You'll see these quantum computing facilities being built and nuclear power plants being built and so on. And you'll have time, while all that's coming together, to move your Bitcoin over to a new quantum resistant wallet. And then as that all settles out, what's going to happen is we're going to be able to see on the blockchain that, hey, all of these legacy wallets, the Bitcoin never moved. And then these cooperative facilities that it will take, skill and talent and resources from different countries to come together to build the nuclear facilities, to agree to be able to use their body of water to cool the nuclear reactors, and build the quantum computers, and build the chips, and design the chips that go into the quantum computers, and so on. So that will require cooperative efforts from multiple countries to put one of those facilities together. So that will become more important than the nation states of today. And then society will orient around these facilities, and there'll be kind of like no man land, hinterlands, out in between the facilities, where there are people who have Bitcoin and they don't need to have anything to do with those facilities, right? Okay. And then what will happen is that the GDP of planet Earth, from a Pareto analysis perspective, will be 80% mining those 5 million loss, quote unquote loss, that now will be in the legacy wallets that never moved over to the BIP quantum resistant wallets. Okay, and so we can talk more about that in a future video.